The broken toy the hall was loud with cruel laughter. Alien voices, rough and sharp, bounced off the cold metal walls. In the middle of the hall, under a single beam of harsh white light, she knelt on the ground. Shackles cut into her wrists and ankles. Her head hung low, long strands of her dark hair hiding most of her face. She looked small, too small, compared to the tall armored creatures standing around her. They called her a toy. Their toy dot every strike they had given her, every chain they locked around her body, had been for their amusement. Her skin carried the marks of whips and blades. Her shoulders sagged as if the weight of the chains was heavier than stone. She was not screaming anymore. She had screamed for days, weeks maybe. Now silence was all she gave them. The crowd did not care. They wanted her silence broken again. They wanted to see her cry, to see her suffer, to see her fall deeper. One alien guard, a beast with 4 arms and skin like stone, stepped forward. He raised a heavy rod and slammed it against her back. The sound echoed like thunder. She fell to the floor, chest hitting the metal ground. The crowd roared in excitement, but she did not cry. She only breathed out weakly, a broken whisper leaving her lips. Her body shook, but no tears came. The aliens laughed louder. "Shackled and broken," one shouted. "Just a toy," shouted another. Her heart beat slowly. Each breath was heavy. She thought maybe this was her end. Maybe soon her mind would finally break, just as they wanted. But then something changed at the edge of the crowd. Someone moved differently. Someone did not laugh, did not cheer. Among the sea of tall, monstrous bodies stood one figure that looked small. Small to them, but not weak. A human. He stood still, shoulders straight, hands at his sides. His clothes were simple, dusty from travel, and his face calm. Too calm. His eyes, however, burned like fire. While the others shouted, his gaze never left the broken girl in chains. The aliens noticed him, and laughter turned sharper. "Look," one cried, "a human, a fragile little human in our hall." The human did not answer. Another alien sneered. "Did you lose your way, little soft-skin? Do you wish to join our games?" Still he was silent. Only his eyes spoke, and they spoke of anger, of a storm that had not yet broken. The guard with the rod raised it again, lifting it high above. His head, the girl tried to move, tried to brace herself, but her body was too weak. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for the next strike, but the rod never came down. A voice cut through the air, calm, low, deadly serious. "Touch her again," the human said, "and I'll end you." The hall froze. For a moment, the sound of laughter died. The guards blinked. The crowd shifted in confusion. Then came the explosion of noise. Laughter, howls, shouts of disbelief filled the air. The aliens laughed so hard the ground shook. A human? Threatening us? One spat, clutching his stomach with laughter. Another pointed at the stranger. "He thinks he can stop us." The guard raised his rod again, this time turning his anger toward the human. But the human did not step back. He did not move at all. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, remained locked on the girl on the floor. The girl raised her head just a little. Through the curtain of her hair, her tired eyes caught the sight of him. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, her heart skipped. Someone was watching her, not with hunger, not with cruelty, but with fury and something else. Something she had forgotten long ago. Hope that the human's words hung heavy in the air, cutting deeper than any weapon. "Touch her again, and I'll end you." The aliens laughed, but behind the laughter was unease. Something in his voice, in the way he stood, felt wrong. He was small. He was weak. He was human. He should have been nothing. And yet, in that moment, he felt like a blade drawn in the dark. Guard lowered the rod slowly, confusion on his face. The crowd's laughter softened into whispers. The girl's breathing shook. Her body was still broken, her chains still tight, but in her chest, for the first time in a long time, something stirred. A small light, fragile but real. The hall full of monsters had called her their toy. Shackled, broken, forgotten. But now, one human had spoken. One human had dared Dot, and the story was about to change. Asterisk, the defiant human, the silence after his words. Did not last long. Dot at first. The aliens laughed again, louder than before. Their voices shook the air, mocking and cruel. To them, a human was nothing. Soft flesh, weak bones. A creature from a lesser world. Yet no matter how loud they laughed, the human's eyes never moved from the girl in chains. His gaze burned into her as if he was carving a promise into the universe itself. You are not alone anymore. The guard with the rod bared his fangs. His forearms flexed, muscles rippling under thick armor. He towered over the human like a mountain ready to fall. You dare threaten us, little soft skin? His voice rumbled, shaking the ground. Do you think you can protect our toy? The human finally lifted his eyes to meet the giant's. His expression was calm, but his words came sharp, every syllable cutting like steel. She is not your toy. The crowd hissed and roared. She is not broken. His voice rose, steady and clear. Dot, the aliens shouted, waving weapons, spitting their rage. The human did not flinch. His final words struck like thunder. She is mine to protect now. The laughter stopped. Dot. It was not silence this time. It was something heavier, something like fear. The crowd did not understand why their hearts had begun to race. They did not understand why the air suddenly felt thinner, colder, heavier. One alien whispered, "What is this? Why does he sound like a warlord?" The guard snarled and stepped forward. He swung the rod, fast as lightning. The human stood still, until the last second, then moved. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with precision. The rod cut through empty air. The human's hand had shot forward, catching the guard's wrist. His grip was like iron. In the same instant, he twisted, and a crack echoed through the hall. The guard screamed as his wrist broke, bones snapping like dry wood. The crowd gasped. For the first time, they did not laugh. Dot. The human did not stop. With one smooth motion, he drove his knee upward, smashing into the guard's chest. The impact thundered, armor denting, ribs cracking. The giant fell to the ground, coughing blood, rod clattering away. The girl's eyes widened. Her breath caught. She had seen many warriors. She had seen battles, violence, cruelty. But never this. Never a human moving with such deadly certainty. The hall shifted. Aliens who had stood tall now leaned back, uneasy. The human straightened, eyes scanning the crowd. His voice carried again, louder now, cold and unshakable. Any who raise a hand. To her, he said, will lose it. Any who laugh at her pain will choke on their own blood. This ends now. The warlord had not spoken yet. From his throne at the far end of the hall, his massive form sat unmoving, glowing eyes fixed on the scene. His silence was more dangerous than the crowd's noise. The girl trembled, her shackles rattling. She tried to speak, but only a broken whisper came out. Why? Why would you? The human glanced at her, just for a moment. His face softened, but his words were still edged in fire. Because you are not theirs. Something in her chest cracked, not from pain, but from something she thought she had lost long ago. A feeling she had buried under fear. Hope. The crowd broke again, their fear turning back into rage. More guards stepped forward, huge bodies blocking the human's path. They raised spears, blades, and claws. This time the human smiled, though. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator. "Good," he said softly, almost to himself. "Let them come." The guards charged. The hall filled with the clash of steel, the thunder of feet, the roar of alien voices and in the center of it all, the human moved like a storm. He was not the strongest. He was not the biggest. But he was faster, sharper, deadlier. Every strike he made was exact. Every blow dropped an enemy to the ground. He fought with the precision of someone who had trained his whole life for this moment. The girl stared her, chains rattling as she leaned forward. She could not look away. Every movement he made carved fire into her heart. For the first time, she began to believe what he had said. Maybe she was not broken. The crowd screamed in rage, but under their shouts was fear. Fear of a human who should have been weak, but stood stronger than any of them. Fear of eyes that carried the promise of death. The human stood tall over the fallen guards, chest rising and falling with steady breath. He wiped blood from his cheek and raised his head. His words cut through the chaos like a blade. "She is free." And then, finally, the warlord rose from his throne. The first strike, the warlord rose. The hall that had been filled with noise fell, silent, as if the air itself had been cut away. The aliens who had laughed moments before now lowered their eyes, trembling. The ground seemed to shiver with each heavy step the warlord took. He was enormous, taller than 3 men, built of muscle. And Shadow, his armor forged from black metal that shimmered with strange fire. His face was a mask of scars and tusks, his eyes burning gold like 2 suns ready to burn out a world. The girl froze where she knelt, shackles rattling. Even after all her suffering, even after all her torment, she had never looked at him this closely. She had always feared him from afar. Now he stood just beyond the beam of light, and his presence alone was enough to crush the air from her lungs. The human, however, did not bow down. The warlord's deep voice rolled through the hall like thunder, asterisk. "You think you have won something, human? You break a few guards, and you dare speak of freedom?" His lips curled back, tusks catching the light. "This creature," he gestured at the chained girl, "is nothing. A slave? A broken toy. She exists only for our amusement, and you," his voice grew sharper, darker, "you exist only to die." The crowd roared at his words, but their roar carried less laughter now, more unease. They wanted blood, but they had seen what this human could do. The human's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. "Touch her again, and I'll end you. I do not care if you are a guard, a beast, or a warlord." The warlord's laugh was like stone cracking. He stepped into the light, towering over the human. His armor hissed with power, runes glowing. Along his chest, his hand reached behind him and drew a blade as long as a man, its edge sparking with red fire. The girl's heart slammed in her chest. She wanted to scream for the human to run, to escape, but no words left her mouth. The warlord raised his weapon high. The hall shook. The crowd screamed with bloodlust. The girl shut her eyes, and then the strike came. The warlord's blade fell like a comet, a mountain collapsing, a storm crashing down. But the human moved, not away, forward. He stepped inside. The swing at the very last instant, his hand snapping upward to catch the warlord's wrist. His other fist slammed into the giant's chest with bone-breaking force. The sound echoed like thunder. The warlord staggered back a single step, surprise flashing across his monstrous face. The hall gasped. No one had ever stopped his strike. Before, no one. The human's eyes burned brighter, his voice low but carrying to every ear in the chamber. "First strike is mine." The words struck harder than fists. The crowd fell into silence. The warlord snarled, fury twisting his features. He swung again, faster this time, blade screaming through the air. The human ducked low, rolling under the strike, and came up inside the warlord's guard. His elbow slammed into the monster's ribs once, twice each blow cracking like breaking. Stone. The warlord grunted, his body shifting from the impact. For a creature who had crushed entire armies, even a stumble was a wound to his pride. The girl's eyes widened. For the first time in her memory, she saw the warlord take a step back. The human pressed forward, relentless. His movements were sharp, deadly, like he had been waiting his entire life for this single fight. He did not waste energy, did not hesitate. Each motion had purpose, each strike carved deeper into the illusion of the warlord's invincibility. The crowd began to murmur, their voices uncertain. Fear spread like fire through dry grass. But the warlord was not beaten. His roar shook the chamber, his blade flashing with energy as he swung in a wide arc. The human leapt back, the fire passing inches from his chest. The heat seared his skin. But he stood tall. The warlord's voice boomed, rage pouring from every word. You dare stand against me? You dare defy an empire? The human answered without fear, his voice cold as steel. I do not stand against an empire. I stand against you. The warlord charged, faster than his size should have allowed. The ground cracked under his weight. His blade cut the air. Each strike meant to tear the human apart. The human fought back, every movement a storm of defiance. He struck, blocked, dodged, and struck again. The clash of their battle filled the hall, sparks flying, echoes crashing like war drums. The girl's chains rattled as she struggled to her knees. Her eyes never left the fight. She saw something in the human's stance, in his fire. He was not only fighting for her freedom, he was fighting for something greater. For the right of one voice to rise against 1,000. The crowd no longer shouted. They watched in stunned silence. For the first time in their lives, they wondered if their warlord could fall. The human's knuckles were bloody, his breath heavy, but his eyes never dimmed. And then, with a final step forward, he drove his fist into the warlord's jaw. The giant stumbled, crashing back into his throne, the ground shaking beneath his weight. Gasps tore through the hall. The human stood tall in the center of the light, blood dripping from his hand, chest rising steady. His voice, low and deadly, cut through the silence. This is only the beginning. Asterisk shackles break. The throne cracked under the warlord's weight as he crashed back. The crowd gasped, their monstrous faces twisted in disbelief. No one, in living memory, had forced the warlord to stumble. The human stood in the beam of light, blood dripping from his knuckles, chest rising slow and steady. His eyes locked on the chained girl. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the roar came. The warlord rose again, bellowing in rage, his tusks dripping with blood. His massive blade hummed with power, glowing runes along. Its edge, the sound of his fury rolled through the chamber like an earthquake. Kill him. The warlord thundered. His voice shook the air. Tear him apart. Dozens of guards surged forward. Claws, blades, spears all flashing under the lights. The human did not back away. He turned slightly, just enough so the girl could see his face. He gave her a look, not of pity, not of sorrow, but of promise. Then he stepped into the storm. The clash was chaos. Guards lunged from every side, their size dwarfing him, their weapons cutting through the air. But the human was faster. His movements were sharp, precise, like a blade forged for this single moment. He ducked under a spear, twisted, and slammed his elbow into a guard's throat. Another swung a hammer he rolled aside, grabbed the guard's leg, and broke it with one brutal strike. Every blow he gave was final. Every motion was survival and defiance woven together. The girl watched, her eyes wide, chains rattling as she struggled to lift herself. Her heart pounded in rhythm with his strikes. She had seen warriors fall. She had seen slaves crushed. But never had she seen someone fight with such fire. The crowd began to shift. Their laughter had died long ago, replaced by whispers, unease, even fear. This was not entertainment anymore. This was rebellion. The human fought his way closer to her, each step painting the ground with fallen guards. Finally, he reached her side. For a moment, the battle blurred around them, chaos fading into silence. He knelt before her, his chest heaving. His hand reached for her shackles. With one sharp pull, he tried to tear them free. The metal resisted, glowing faintly with alien energy. His jaw tightened. He pulled again, harder, muscles straining, veins standing out against his skin. The girl shook her head weakly. You can't. They are made to never break." Her voice was small, broken. The human looked into her eyes. His voice was steady, sharp as steel. "Everything breaks. With a roar, he yanked the chain with both hands. Metal screeched, sparks flying as the shackle cracked. One more pull, and it snapped apart, pieces scattering across the ground. The girl gasped, staring at her freed wrist, as if it was not real. He moved to the next shackle. The crowd screamed in outrage, the warlord's fury shaking the walls. But the human did not stop. One by one he pulled, and one by one the shackles shattered. Each break echoed like thunder. The girl's tears fell freely now, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of something she thought had been stolen forever hope. When the last chain broke, she collapsed into his arms, body trembling. For the first time, she was free. The warlord's roar cut through the moment. He charged, blade raised, high fury burning in his eyes. The human pushed the girl gently aside, stepping forward to meet the storm. His voice rang out, clear and unyielding. "She is free, and none of you will chain her again." The warlord's blade came down, a storm of fire and steel. The human caught it with his bare hands, the heat searing his skin, smoke rising from his flesh, but he did not let go. His grip was iron, his eyes locked on the monster before him. The girl screamed, trying to rise, but her body was too weak. She watched as the human, bleeding, burning, unbroken, forced the blade back inch by inch. The crowd stood frozen. They had seen humans beg, scream, die. They had never seen one defy. With a roar that shook the chamber, the human twisted the blade, free, and drove his fist into the warlord's face. The giant staggered again, tusks cracking under the force. The human turned, grabbed one of the shattered chains from the ground, and wrapped it around his fist like a weapon. His eyes burned with fury, his voice low and final. "These chains are not hers anymore. They are yours." The warlord roared and charged again, and the battle of monsters and man thundered through the hall. The girl, weak but free, pushed herself up. Her body trembled, but her eyes burned with new fire. For the first time in forever, she whispered, words that were not of surrender, but of defiance. "Fight. Break him. I am not their toy anymore." And for the first time, the crowd felt it, the weight of change, the taste of fear. The shackles were broken, and nothing would ever be the same. The warlord's wrath. The chains still rattled on the floor, broken and useless. The girl, weak but free, clutched her wrist and stared at them with wide eyes. Her heart beat fast, not from fear anymore, but from something new, something she had almost forgotten. Hope. But that hope trembled when the warlord moved. His growl rolled through the hall like a storm. He rose to his full height, towering above the human, his massive frame glowing with rage. His black armor cracked, and strange fire leaked through the gaps. The golden light of his eyes blazed brighter, turning the entire hall into a furnace of hate. The crowd pressed back, fear creeping into their voices. They had never seen their warlord like this. His fury was a weapon more dangerous than any blade. "You dare," the warlord thundered, his voice shaking the walls, "to shame me in my own hall? You dare touch what is mine? You dare," his tusks dripped blood as he roared, "to break my chains?" The human did not answer. He stood tall, knuckles bloody, chain wrapped around his fist like a weapon forged from defiance. His silence was louder than any words. The warlord raised his blade, and this time the runes along its length ignited. Red fire spilled from it, licking across the floor, filling the air with the smell of burning stone. Sparks rained down as the warlord's power grew, his voice a storm of hate. "I will not just kill you," he growled. "I will erase you. I will burn your name from the stars. And when you are ash, I will chain her again, and she will know your death was nothing." The girl's breath caught. For a moment, fear threatened to crush her. But when her eyes turned to the human, she found only calm. He was breathing hard, blood dripping, but his gaze was unshaken. His voice cut through the fire like cold steel. "You will not touch her again." The warlord roared and struck. The blade came down like lightning, smashing into the floor where the human had stood. Stone exploded, sparks filling the air. The human leapt aside, rolling, the heat of the fire scorching his arm. He rose instantly, chain wrapped tighter around his fist. The warlord swung again, faster, stronger. Each blow shattered the ground, sending cracks racing across the hall. Columns shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The crowd screamed and stumbled. Back, no longer eager spectators, but fearful prey trapped in the shadow of a monster. But the human moved like water around the storm. He ducked, slipped, struck. His fist, wrapped in the broken chain, slammed into the warlord's side. The giant grunted but did not fall. Instead, he roared louder, his strikes growing even more furious. The girl crawled to her knees, her voice breaking through the chaos. "You can't. He's too strong." The human glanced at her, only for a heartbeat, and gave the smallest nod. His voice, low but steady, reached her even through the roar. "Empires fall, monsters fall. Not today, not while I stand." And then he charged. The hall shook with the clash. The warlord's blade screamed with fire. The human's chained fist struck like thunder. Blow after blow echoed, sparks flying, blood spilling. Each strike seemed to tilt the balance, first to the warlord, then to the human, then back again. The crowd no longer cheered. They stood silent, fear gripping their hearts. They had believed their warlord untouchable. Now they watched him bleed. The girl's hands shook as she clutched the broken shackles lying beside her. She whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "He fights for me, just for me." The warlord's fury grew wild. He slammed his foot into the ground, sending a shockwave that threw the human back. The chain tore from his hand, clattering across the floor. The warlord's laugh was dark, cruel. "Look at you now," he sneered. "Weak, bleeding, small. You think your defiance means anything? You are just flesh. I am eternal." The human rose slowly, blood streaking down his face. His hands shook, but his eyes still burned like fire. And then, in the silence, he smiled. "You bleed," he said. The warlord froze. The human's voice grew louder, stronger. "You bleed. You breathe. You fall. Just like the rest." The words cut deeper than blades. The warlord's laugh faltered, replaced with rage. He charged, his blade glowing so bright It lit the hall like a second sun. The girl screamed as the weapon came down, but the human stepped forward, catching the blade with both hands. The heat seared his flesh. Blood poured down his arms, but he held it. He held it with the strength of fury, of promise, of unshakable will. The crowd stared in silence. The warlord leaned down, snarling inches from the human's face. You are nothing. The human's voice was a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the hall. And nothing is enough to end you. With a roar, he twisted the blade aside and drove his fist, wrapped in his own bleeding chains, straight into the warlord's jaw. The sound of bone breaking echoed like thunder. The warlord staggered, stumbling backward, blood spraying from his tusks. The hall fell dead silent. The human stood, chest heaving, hands torn and burned, but unbroken. He turned his head toward the girl, his voice steady, final. He will not chain you again. And for the first time, the crowd believed it might be true. Asterisk the last stand, the warlord staggered, blood dripping from his mouth, tusks cracked. The crowd stared in silence, the disbelief on their faces louder than any roar. Their god of war had bled. Their champion had stumbled not, but the warlord was not finished. His fury burned hotter, his golden eyes glowing like suns on fire. The ground trembled as he stomped forward, his massive blade dragging sparks across the floor. His armor split wider, fire leaking from the cracks in his skin, as if his body itself was made of molten rage. The human stood in the center of the hall, blood pouring down his arms, burns smoking, chest heaving. His fists were torn and raw, but his eyes still carried the fire of defiance. The girl, still weak, crawled closer, her breath ragged. She could feel the heat from the warlord's body burning against her skin. Her heart screamed for the human to stop, to run, but she knew he never would. He had come this far not to survive, but to end it. The warlord's voice rumbled like a collapsing mountain. You are broken. You are finished. I will crush you, and she will kneel in chains again. This ends with your death. The human wiped blood from his lips, then smiled through the pain. His voice was hoarse but steady. No, this ends with yours. The hall shook as they collided. The warlord swung his blade, fire screaming through the air. The human ducked, rolled, and struck with his chain-wrapped fist, slamming into the warlord's ribs. The giant grunted, but swung again, faster, harder. Sparks exploded. Stone cracked. The battle was not just a fight, it was a storm. Every strike from the warlord felt like the fall of mountains. Every dodge, every counter from the human felt like lightning in the dark. Blood stained the floor, heat scorched the walls, and the air shook with every impact. The crowd pressed back against the walls, their faces pale with fear. They had never seen their warlord truly fight. They had never seen him struggle. And now they saw something worse out in his eyes. The girl gripped the broken shackle in her hand, her knuckles white. Her body trembled, but not from fear anymore. Something was building inside her: anger, rage, a fire she thought had been beaten out of her forever. The warlord roared and brought his blade down. The human caught it with both hands, the heat burning his flesh, smoke rising from his skin. He screamed, but he held on, muscles straining, blood pouring down. The warlord leaned close, his voice a snarl. You cannot win. You are only human. The human's face twisted in pain, but his eyes did not break. Yes, he hissed through clenched teeth, and that is enough. With a roar, he twisted the blade aside and slammed his head into the warlord's face. Bone cracked, blood sprayed. The giant stumbled back, his fire flickering. The girl's heart thundered. She could see it, the impossible. The warlord was weakening, but the human was weakening too. His legs shook, his breaths grew shallow, his body threatened to collapse at any moment. He could not last much longer. The warlord roared again, swinging wide. The blade smashed into the ground, the shockwave throwing the human across the hall. He crashed into a pillar, blood coughing from his mouth. His body sagged, barely able to rise. The warlord raised his blade for the final strike. The crowd leaned forward, breathless, waiting for the kill. "No," the girl whispered. Her body trembled, her knees shook, but she forced herself up. No more. Her hand closed around the fallen weapon of a guard, a jagged spear. It was heavy, far too heavy for her broken body, but she lifted it with shaking arms. Her eyes locked on the warlord. The warlord's blade rose high. His laugh echoed, cruel and certain. And then the girl screamed, a sound of rage and defiance, and hurled the spear. The weapon flew through the air and struck true burying deep into the warlord's shoulder. The giant roared in pain, stumbling, his blade faltering. The fire along its edge flickered. His golden eyes widened in shock. The human rose, broken, bleeding, but alive. He looked at her, the girl who had been chained, beaten, broken. She stood tall now, fire in her eyes, her body trembling, but her spirit unshaken. Together, for the first time, they stood against the monster. The human's voice rang out, low and deadly. "You are finished." The girl's voice followed, steady and fierce. "I am not your toy." The warlord roared, swinging wildly, but his strength was fading. The human stepped forward, fists raised, every movement fueled by fury and survival. The girl lifted another fallen weapon, weak but determined, standing by his side. The hall erupted into chaos. Not laughter, not sheer fear. The crowd of monsters, who had once called her a toy, now watched her rise. They watched a human defy an empire. They watched the impossible unfold. The last stand had begun. Asterisk, a new beginning. The warlord roared, fire spilling from his mouth, his blade glowing like a burning sun. His steps shook the ground, each one a quake of fury. Blood dripped from the wound in his shoulder where the girl's spear had struck, and for the first time in his reign, his hands trembled. The human stood tall again, battered and broken, but unyielding. His fists were torn, his arms burned, blood poured down his side, yet he was still there, still standing. Beside him, the girl rose, weak but fierce, her body trembling but her eyes blazing with defiance. The crowd pressed back against the walls. No laughter, no cheers. Only silence, broken by the warlord's rage. They had thought this was entertainment. Now they understood it was history. The warlord's voice thundered. "You dare fight me together? You." He pointed at the girl with his massive bloodied hand. "You are nothing. A broken toy, a plaything. And you." His golden eyes burned into the human. "You are only human. Both of you will die screaming." The human wiped blood from his mouth, then smiled, though pain racked every bone in his body. "Then come and try." The girl's voice followed, steady, unshaken. "I am not your toy." The warlord roared, charging. His blade cut the air, fire spilling in waves. The hall shook, the ceiling cracked, stone fell like rain. His fury was a storm meant to crush everything before it. But this time, he faced not one enemy, but two. The human stepped forward, slipping under the blade, fists striking with deadly precision. Every blow was thunder, every movement pure defiance. The girl, still weak, moved beside him, seizing a fallen weapon. She swung with trembling arms, each strike fueled not by strength, but by rage, by years of pain turned into fire. Together, they fought as one. The warlord swung again, his blade, slamming into the floor, fire exploding outward. The human shielded the girl, his body burning, but he pushed through. He slammed his chain-wrapped fist into the warlord's jaw. At the same moment, the girl drove her weapon into his side. The giant roared in pain, blood spilling, his fire dimming. His steps grew heavier, slower. The invincible monster was faltering. The crowd whispered in terror. Their warlord, their god of chains, was falling. The girl shouted through her tears, voice breaking but strong. No more chains, no more. Her words struck the hall like a spear. The crowd shrank back, as if the walls themselves had spoken. The warlord swung wildly, desperate now. His blade cut the air, but his strength was failing. The human dodged, countered, struck again and again, each hit breaking the illusion of his power. The girl's trembling arms swung her weapon, her strikes clumsy but true, each one drawing blood. Finally, the warlord staggered, dropping to one knee. His massive frame shook, his golden eyes dimming. His blade clattered against the floor. Fire along its edge dying into smoke. Silence filled the hall. The human stood before him, chest heaving, body broken but unbent. The girl stood beside him, weak but free, her eyes blazing. The warlord lifted his head, blood dripping from his tusks. His voice was a growl, softer now, almost disbelief. You are nothing." The human raised his chain-wrapped fist. His voice was cold, final. Nothing was enough. With one final strike, he drove his fist into the warlord's skull. The giant collapsed, shaking the ground, his fire extinguished. The hall was still. No roars, no laughter, only silence. The crowd, once loud and cruel, now trembled in fear. Their warlord was dead. Their chains had been broken. And standing in the center of it all was a human, and the girl who had once been their toy. The girl looked at the fallen body, her hands shaking. For a moment, she could not breathe. She had dreamed of this, prayed for this, but never believed it possible. She turned to the human, her voice barely a whisper. You saved me." The human shook his head, his eyes steady. "No, you saved yourself. I only reminded you how." Her chest ached, not from pain, but from something she had lost long ago, pride. She straightened, her voice stronger now. "I was broken, but not anymore." A human nodded, his gaze sweeping. Over the terrified crowd, his voice rang out, steady, sharp. "Listen well, she is free. She is no one's toy. And if any of you try to chain her again, you will answer to me." The crowd lowered their eyes, fear gripping them. None dared move. None dared speak. The girl stepped forward, broken shackles still in her hand. She held them high, her voice rising, strong and clear for the first time. "I am not your slave. I am not your plaything. I am free." The words echoed through the hall, bouncing off the walls, searing into every ear. The silence broke not with cheers, but with the sound of chains dropping. Slaves in the shadows, forgotten like she had once been, stepped forward. One by one, they lifted their broken shackles and let them fall. The hall filled with the sound of chains hitting stone, a sound of rebellion. The girl looked at the human, tears streaming down her face. "They will hunt us." The human's voice was steady, calm. "Let them. We are ready." She nodded, her trembling hand finding strength as she reached for his. For the first time, she did not feel weak. She did not feel small. She felt alive. Together, they stepped over the body of the fallen warlord. The hall of chains was silent. The crowd parting in fear as they walked into the unknown got no longer prey, not toys, not broken hunters. Asterisk.